Hello everyone, my name is Kris Young. I'm from a small town from the upstate of South Carolina. I have 2 dogs, Coco and Max, and 1 cat, Rashida. I graduated from Clemson University with a bachelor's degree in psychology. I love to travel, learn, and be an advocate for those who cannot advocate for themselves. Join me on my journey as I cultivate and bring awareness to topics and issues that are prevalent in the world we live in today. Today, in Series 1 of Educational Disparities, we will have guests as well as my second cousin, Lee Williams. Lee Williams is the Executive Director of Equity and Inclusion at the Chapel Hill-Carrboro Schools in North Carolina. We will be discussing the impact of COVID-19 on the educational system. So Lee, can you tell me a little bit about your role as an Executive Director of Equity and Inclusion?
Sure. Blessings, fam, for letting me be the first to grace your presence on this podcast. Peace and blessings on your journey. I know it's going to be great because like you said, we second cousins and we both graduated from one of the most prestigious and illustrious universities on the face of the earth, Clemson University. Shout out to, I'm not going to give my class number because it's, I feel old at this point. So the work of an equity, equity is, first of all, equity is all of our work, right? And we think of terms of equity, it's the things that we need to do to ensure that we are removing barriers, maximizing the opportunities, removing barriers for those who are generally marginalized. And so one of the misconceptions around equity work is that you're taking away from somebody else. And so that's not the case. I'm not removing from someone else to give to somebody else. I'm ensuring that all people need to have an equal stance in which they can need to perform. And so you're talking about removing barriers that are generally marginalized, and that looks like for our Black and brown people, that a situation that was created for them. You look at the marginalization of women of color, you look at men of color, you look at in gender discretion, gender identity. So in equity work, it's looking to make it an equitable process. We cannot continue to think that equity and equal mean the same things. I can give someone, and everyone gets and a school gets a computer, but if everyone doesn't have access to the internet, then I gave everyone an equal chance to having a computer. But the equality and the equity in that is to ensure that if you don't have Wi-Fi, I get you Wi-Fi along with your computer. Not everybody needs that. So that's where equity work comes into play. And if we dig that deeper, is how do we just education that has been known to harm and to have educational malpractice for our people of color.
Right, that's awesome. So how did you get to this point in your career?
So I don't think it's a point in my career. I think it's a point where my life's journey and my work met together, right? So this becomes my why. And so I started off as a teacher in Douglasburg in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Then from there, a couple other things, from a STEM recruiter to a drug testing coordinator, which is an interesting situation. Like now in the position that I'm in, reflecting on, I was a drug testing coordinator for athletes. Let me run that paradigm back for you. A drug testing coordinator for athletes. Generally, most of our athletes are Black and brown. So therefore, I am drug testing people who I think I should be believing to help move and remove barriers, but yet I'm the one who could be standing in their way, right? So thinking about how the system sets this whole notion up. And so at that point became a notion to where, what do I do to move this work forward? That's a principle I often found myself ensuring that we were making a school that was equitable for all of our kids. But then school, it was my area. So how do you make this a larger work? And that's how I landed here. So I think it's more of the journey that my life took me on that helped me get to this place here where I'm blessed that my journey and my work actually meet to make one place where I can divulge my energy and to try to make a change into our system.
That is incredible. I love it. So let's move on into the topic, COVID-19 in the educational system. So as we both know, we're experiencing a global pandemic, COVID-19.
Yeah.
So how do you think with schools moving to virtual learning during mid-March and early April for the remainder of the 2019 school year has impacted the academic performance of different groups of students, such as students of different races and socioeconomic backgrounds?
So I'm going to say this, and this is going to be the popular answer, but I don't think it really did much of the difference. So let me explain when I say that. It highlighted things that we have been saying for generations, right? The educational system has never been designed for people of color. And what we're saying now is that you see the disparities that are missing. So when we talk about the social economic disadvantage, we talk about our people of color, we talk about our students with learning disabilities that are generally more marginalized to be students of color, we are now showing people, everyone's like, oh my God, oh my goodness, like COVID-19 has really messed the world up. Nah, baby, you just not realizing the party. It's been this way. COVID-19 is just also knocking at your doorstep in America. Mm-hmm. So now you're saying that there needs to be all this equitable change, and it's interesting because now they want to invoke change and have all this change because it's knocking on white America's doorstep. Because what's interesting to me is all of a sudden we found a way to have free internet.
Right.
All of a sudden we found all these mediums that we can start having Zoom meetings online. That's free. Online. That's free. Like everything now became a sense of access for all when it started to knock on white America's door. Mm-hmm. And so the thing that really gets me frustrated is now it's like, well, what are we going to do for children of color? Well, baby girl, we've been here in this place for a long time. We've been singing this same rap song for the longest. You're now coming to the party, and we fast forward that and add some gasoline to this fire with the murder of George Floyd, and us seeing this 8 minutes and 46 seconds worth of a lynching. Right now, you topple that with the educational system has to crumble. So I think that what we have done has been a horrific job. It's been educational malpractice from the beginning. COVID-19 did not cause more educational malpractice. Right. It caused a highlight to the malpractice that's been happening. It caused us to really stop and evaluate that maybe practices we have into place should be removed, which are things that we've been saying. Mm-hmm. This is one of the first times that I know of that we do any end of grade standardized testing.
Yes.
And guess what? I got a secret for you. The world didn't end.
Yeah, that is very true.
Kids still learn. We still promoted kids to the next grade. So now what you're telling me in this world that we need standardized testing, do we really? Or was it a way to continue to marginalize and segregate our students? Just say who can go into AIG, who can go into EC, who goes to which college, who does not, right? And so to me, COVID-19 did not do anything because a lot of districts missed the chance to really take actual data broken down by race around what this stuff looks like when we talk about students checking in, students who need, we know who need Wi-Fi and internet access, but that's not new. We knew that before COVID-19.
Exactly.
What happened is it was just on the forefront of attention now because when we had to knee-jerkly move into that, we were unprepared. Mm-hmm. And people say, well, we caught us off guard. No, it didn't catch you off guard. It caught you with your hand in a cookie dish. It caught you promoting what you felt was important. Yeah. So for me, for educational purposes, I am extremely happy at the things that it highlighted now that everyone is forced to see. That it's not just being swept up on the road because it's knocking once again on everyone's doorstep. And so when we think about it, in my opinion, I think the students who this achievement gap that we have were students who were already in the gap. And the regular classroom said it wasn't working. I mean, if it was, they wouldn't be in the gap.
Right. Exactly.
And so you can't blame COVID for a situation that you created. So that's, like I said, that's not the popular answer for people. I think we want to really try to find a way to blame COVID for this.
Yeah.
You can't blame a pandemic on your malpractice that you've been operating on for years. Come on now.
Exactly.
No, you don't get it easy out that way. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I honestly was kind of jealous because they didn't require the SAT and stuff for USC, University of South Carolina admissions for the 2021 school admissions, because personally I'm not good at standardized testing at all, so I'm like, wow, I'm jealous, but I'm honestly glad they put that to the forefront. It stinks that COVID had to happen in order for them to do this and recognize this, but then again, I'm kind of glad. But also, how do you feel about those students who have, I guess, their parents to help them with e-learning and things like that, have the extra support and time to help their students with their homework, rather than those who don't?
So, I don't feel any kind of way because, truth be told, I'm one of those families. I mean, my wife and I are both in education, so we helped our kids as much as we could. What I struggle with, though, is the fact that where educators just turned and dropped it onto parents, like, oh no, it's your responsibility now. We still have the responsibility to educate children. And so what you end up doing them is, once again, here's another disparity that we're outlining, right? We are now saying that if you're in this dual family home, and the traditional family, that you can help your students, and you have the opportunity because of your resources and your wealth that you can now help your students with their assignments and with their education. Then great. But then we're also saying is, well, we really don't care about these single family homes we're economically disadvantaged because we're still going to throw these things at you with no other resources and support. Once again, looking at the situation of where equity or the inequities have been highlighted. Because guess what? That was the same thing we were doing when you were home. When you were sending a buttload of homework home, it was the same process.
Right.
These dual family homes where mom and dad are there and able to have wealth and resources to be able to provide for their children, get these extra tutors, they got the extra support. When the families who could not afford that didn't have it. And so what I'm noticing is I can't be mad at the family for having it, but I can be extremely pissed and mad at the educational system for knowing that exists and yet continuing not to put these structures in place and the resources in place to help mitigate those problems for students who have it. Right. So for me, it's not about the families that can do it. It's about how did we support the families who could not? And that's the frustrating part because we didn't do jack.
Mm-hmm. So how do you think we could have done better? How do you think the educational system can help those families?
I think we need to blow the whole system up. Right? Like you can't, and I know that sounds crazy because I work in the system. Right. But it's so hard to fix a system from the outside in. We're currently in these conversations around do we have SROs in schools? And my personal opinion is no. There is no need for an armed law enforcement to walk around a school building. It provides a sense of terror and trauma for our black and brown students. Mm-hmm. And you can say, well, what if we had an armed shooter? I hear all of your what ifs, but the last school shooting we had, that security or SRO ran out the building and refused to come back in. There is no data that proves SROs are actually beneficial. Mm-hmm. So my point is, when we're even having this conversation now, people are trying to figure out, well, what do we replace SROs with? Another form of security? No. We will replace them with something that is beneficial for our students. So I say that to say we cannot just keep tearing apart this system because the system will rebuild itself. That's why I say we need to blow the whole thing up.
Right. Because
if you blow the whole thing up and the foundation has crumbled and is destroyed, now we can rebuild it in the right manners. And the things that we need to do are making sure that we are finding and recruiting and retaining teachers of color. And we're training our teachers of color around restorative practices, around racial equity work. It's mandatory that every teacher has some lens of racial equity work and also addressing their racial biases and their racial identity. That's mandatory for teachers we should have. We should also have this mandatory sense of where student voice is deemed to be the most important in the classroom, and not to where it's this idea of student voice like we let kids raise their hand, but how do kids become the essence of what the classroom is all about, right? So I've been watching the show called The Get Down. I don't know if you've seen it, little cuz, but it's when I tell you the show has me blown, like me and the wifey, the kids are down visiting family, so we've been like food nighting and dating it up and like binge watching the show like young folks again. And The Get Down is all about this design and creation of rap. Like I call myself a hip hop head. Right. And at one point, Shaolin Fantastic is the DJ. He says, I am the conductor. I drive the party with my DJ, and you lace the MC in with your lines. Like he calls the guy books. Like you drop lines and bars. And what resonated with me was, what if our students were the conductors? What if they drove the educational moments? What if they dropped the beat? They scratched the record. It was on their time, their tempo, their vibe, their feel. It's just what they wanted. And the teacher just laid some lines on top of that, right? Like helped to make sure you knew which way this mug was flowing. But you, as the DJ, you drove that whole piece. That's true student voice. Right. What we look at now for student voice is, okay, I'm going to give you a chance to give you a project. Mess me with that. First of all, this project was whack in the beginning. You forced me to do a project without even really asking me what I wanted to do a project around. And so when I think about essence of student voices, student voices empower. The book Not Light but Fire says that we are not empowering student voices that are already empowered. We must give them the space for student voices to be shine and to be out there. That's what, as education, we need to do, is to back up. I think the other part we need to make sure that we're doing is we're having real culturally relevant classrooms. Yes. We got to see student cultures. The loudest walls in a school to me are the blank white walls. When I see a blank white wall, that is the loudest, because what it represents is this institutionalization of education. It represents that I don't need to color your space with your culture because my white culture is already ever present. Right. So forget my black and brown bodies that are here, my indigenous people, forget all of that, forget my women of color, my students who are queer or lesbian, forget that. I'm saying whiteness of this white wall, the purity of white. this the educational system needs to be focused on. And that's the loudest wall for me. That's letting me know you don't care what other voices are here. We want this just blank institutionalization for learning. And that can provide a problem for all of your students, black, white, and all.
Yeah. I definitely agree. I know when I was in the middle grades education program at UGA, one of the main points was student-led learning, as well as doing cultural relevant pedagogy in your classroom. But for me personally, when I was going through the teacher preparation program, I felt like there was even some barriers for teachers of color that wanted to be teachers, like IPTE and all these requirements for testing, and that really stinks because they're trying to, again, it's a system all around, even with teachers.
Yeah. I was a teacher. When I started off teaching, I started off lateral entry. It's a program where if you did not have your teacher certification, you could get into teaching. And let's be honest, when I was in college, I enjoyed every bit of Clemson. So my GPA was not the strongest coming out. And so I went in this lateral entry program. The first year, 95% of my students scored the level of proficiency or higher.
Right.
So we in the classroom getting it. Now, I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew I wanted these kids to learn, and their culture and my culture matched, and I wanted to hear their voices. So we just had a good time.
Right.
It took me years to pass this test, and yet every year my students produced. And I kept wondering in my mind, like, do I really need this test to validate the work that I really can do as a teacher?
Exactly.
And yet North Carolina Department of Education says yes, but they also want to have my money because every time I have to retake that test, I got to repay. Now, I'm thinking at some point someone should say, he's not passed the test, but his students are. Isn't that what's important in your mind? "Quote unquote," education should be about student passing the test, right? Which we know is a varsity in itself. We put too much on versus the ability to just deliver content, knowledge, and the way that we drive it to be. You have started a podcast, and I'm super proud of the work that you're getting ready to do and the work that you're doing. But none of that was on a test.
Exactly.
You weren't tested on your ability to start a podcast. You have not been tested on your ability to think innovative and think creative. You were tested on old, dead rhetoric and knowledge that you should know. When is the last time you had a conversation about the Pythagorean theorem or anything Shakespearean?
Yeah, probably since high school. I don't know. And that's been like, how many years ago now? Like 6?
Yeah, don't do that, because I'm looking at high school like that was...
You don't have to answer.
I'm still box top up with the Gumby cut fresh, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so when we think about this piece of education, we put so much focus on that testing portion that you're right, the barriers are in place when you have educators, and especially thinking about educators of color, when you came to the educational system, you went through trauma as a student. Now you're trying to endure me through more trauma through this rigorous testing that's whitewashed and full of biases in itself, and then expect me to want to be energized and go to teach a class. I'm already starting off with my back pushed up against the wall. Come on, miss me with that and have several seats. Uncalled for.
Yeah. So how do you think, so for teachers that aren't of color, how do you think what's some advice for them going into the classroom? Because I know that sometimes students of color are like, I don't want to make assumptions, but sometimes that they might deem us as loud, angry, label us, and then just dismiss us instead of just, trying to understand us. So how do you think they could improve, or we can improve as a whole?
So I think for our white educators, a couple things that needs to happen. A, you need to do some racial identity work and be honest with yourself, right? If you're coming into this space and you have a problem or you feel afraid of black bodies, don't get into education. Get out. Go do something else.
Yeah.
Be realistic about it. And if you're then getting into education and you feel like, you know what, I can't wait to save, like you have that blindside moment where you think you're going to come and save all the black and brown children, you got another set of problems.
Yeah.
You are not the white savior. So, A, check yourself and check your intentions. Then you need to do some real studying and work around what it means to be culturally relevant, what it means to know how your whiteness shows up in spaces. And I think that's work that we don't do in the higher ed systems when we're training our teachers and they come into classrooms. I've yet to understand why we don't have conversations like my man Dr. Christopher M. Matt, shout out to him. He wrote a book for white folks who teach in the hood, and this brother is brilliantly dope. And he talks about how we come into spaces, black folks walk into spaces, whiteness can look like, oh man, that loud kid that's in the room coming in late. Oh no, he's a troublemaker. He's sitting in the back of the classroom, and yet glorify the student who is sitting up front. Because that's what we deem education to be, without missing that the kid who sit in the back of the classroom came in slow, slapping everybody up, taking his time to get there, letting his swag and play drip because that's who he is, actually has a sense of leadership that you don't understand. Right? So there's this idea of branding. How does the brand show up in the space? And what we need our teachers to understand is that a student's brand should be able to show up any way they want it to. Mind you, I'm not just kicking this flag for the white teachers. They definitely need to be understanding this work. But we got some black and brown teachers that can also cause some severe harm by being white in their space. Let me kick that back for you. Yeah. So if you as a black person are still operating in whiteness and not seeing the racism that's around that you have engulfed and swallowed in and been a part of, you're just as detrimental, if not more detrimental, to some of our black bodies when you walk into spaces. Because when our black students see a teacher that looks like them and they have not ever seen one, we get excited on the inside, right? There's this sense of family that comes out, and then all of a sudden, next thing you know, you jazzing at me like the same white teacher. Now I let you in a space without you even knowing you in that space, and you crush my soul. And so that's work that we have to do collectively, but definitely a lot of the whiteness has to be removed from that space. We have to decolonize the space, right? Colonization of education has happened, for many years. Education is a colonization all in itself. And how do we decolonize? I think that's a big aspect of it. But then also, too, teaching true history, teaching true knowledge. We have to have more than one single voice in the classroom. I read so many of the White Dead Poet Society till I'm sick. I need you to drop me a little Zora, drop me a little Langston, bring me some Medgar Evers into space. Give me some of the poetry that, even though you all are afraid of Malcolm X, like bring these works into places that are real, that resonate with me. And what that does is it removes two things. There's a stereotype lift and a stereotype threat. The stereotype lift is when white students don't ever see students of color in their literature, or people of color in their literature, and they only see whiteness showing up, then they are believing that whiteness is right and it's smart. And so therefore I'm reading all this white literature like, wow, that's great. And it's also providing this thought that, you know what, maybe black people aren't that smart because I don't see them in any of the books that I read. And if we're reading books in school and reading is important and books are important, education is important, and black people aren't in them, then guess what? Pseudo fact, blacks aren't important and educated. Well, that's what I come away with as a white student. So therefore I am perpetuating racism without even realizing that I'm engulfing it and eating it up because I'm being taught this. And it's what I'm not being taught on the other side that's causing me to eat it. As a black student, I'm also feeling that same thing. The stereotype threat that, man, maybe I'm not good enough to be in here. Maybe this space isn't for me, education isn't for me, all while white students are getting lifted. And so we have to make sure that we're getting voices from our indigenous people, from our, black gay writers that are dropping knowledge. Bettina Love, who's out in Georgia, mad love to Dr. Love, wrote the book for Abolish Teachings, We Want to Do More Than Just Survive. And her and Dr. Muhammad were on a call a few weeks ago. It was phenomenal. And one of the things they said was, if you really want to learn how to move this work forward, talk to a queer black woman. When I said that, I was like, okay. But the intersectionalities of race, gender, and gender identity show up in that space. Right. Where are the literature? Or is our school producing and giving that literature for students to really see then some true marks of moving forward? Or do we have to consistently sit with dead white Englishmen? That's where we have to look at things differently. So when I say blow the system up, that's what I mean. Start this mug all over, like even down to the common core pieces. What are we teaching? In U.S. history here in North Carolina, parts of U.S. history begin well after slavery. Why don't we want to teach the truth about what our nation did with slavery? We have the 1619 Project from Hannah Nicole Jones. You got something to teach off of, but make America the great. Why don't we show the lasting effects of slavery and the racial constructs it's made now, and how it's still showing itself with the educational system, with the inequities in healthcare, with the inequities in our in redlining and in home ownership. Like, that's a lasting effect. but then also show the beauty of what we were as a people and how you came and raped and robbed our land. Like, show all of that. And that's what we don't want to do in education. In white education, we don't want to do it anymore. Mm-hmm. So you got me on one right now, man. This is my vacation day. I was taking the day off, but you put me back on one. Yeah. Good questions.
No, I love it. Representation is very important, and I think that in a lot of our school settings, we learn that, how we act or who we are as a person, just, mm-hmm. being black, isn't right, because they designed a system for us to assimilate to. We need to be like this. Mm-hmm. We're only learning about mm-hmm. this. In order to be accepted in the classroom, I have to act like this. I have to talk mm-hmm. like that. And then that just transgresses into other parts of our life. Like when we go mm-hmm. out in public, or when we go for a job interview, we do the whole switch around.
Mm-hmm. We are forced to assimilate into code switch,
right.
And we are the masters at it. We are the masters at our own fate as people of color. And it's down to, like I said, branding. When you think about branding, how does your brand show up in the classroom space? And sometimes my brand is not what the teacher can believe in. Mm-hmm. And so as a student of color, I'm sitting here trying to figure out, how do I switch my brand and still be true to me, but still give you a brand that you can accept? Mm-hmm. When at the end of the day, maybe we should be switching that whole thing up. Yeah. Teachers should be accepting the brand that the students bring in and asking, how can my brand as a teacher help to highlight, push up, and support and uplift the brand you bring to me in this classroom? Mm-hmm. We don't do that. So, Brad, you're right. Representation is key. The branding is key.
Right. So, moving on to the next question. So, with the 2020-21 school year fast approaching, mm-hmm. what do you mm-hmm. think the school year will look like for both staff and students with COVID going on?
It's interesting, so right now, here in North Carolina, a lot of our school districts, the governor came out and said that Plan B is the option, which Plan B is the remote and mix of sort of a hybrid going into school. So you have a few kids coming at this time, whatever schedule may be, but it's reducing the numbers for students to come, some actual in-face instruction, but keeping that rotating out to keep more students coming in. And so the governor released that actually 2 days ago. Since then, school districts have decided that they are going to actually start with Plan C, which is fully remote first, and to go fully remote to give this some time to see, the health of our students. I will tell you what I am more perplexed with is the idea, the notion that we must get back into school for the economy to be effective. Mm-hmm. That's a system problem.
Right.
Educators should not have to be in school for this economy to be existing. That's a problem we have in our system overall. And if we continue to perpetuate that same idea, then we're perpetuating this system's idea to keep moving the way that it is. And that's the problem that I have. We should not be so harsh. And it is crazy. When March happened and we went out, there was all this love for teachers. Thank mm-hmm. you for all that you're doing. I've never seen anything like this. Teachers go from being praised to villainized in a matter of months.
Right.
Because now they're afraid to go back into the buildings with rightful fear. I mean, we don't have a cure for this thing, and yet we are wanting to put our students back in school. So I think you're going to see a lot of the teachers' voices speaking up, and I think as districts, I challenge them to still find ways to pay your staff, classified employees and certified, meaning your bus drivers, even if they don't drive a freaking bus, they still need to be paid as if they were driving. Same as for our TAs. If they're not doing anything after school care, they still need to be paid as if they were. We need to continue to pay our educators despite of, because it's not like we're not going to go back into education. This is something that we created. This is something that we've had to play and find our way through as well. I just don't think throwing educators back into a school system just because you want the economy to be picked back up is the answer either.
Yeah, that is really, really interesting. I know our governor, he did a conference yesterday, and where the teachers that voiced their health concerns, he was like, we're all in the same boat. There's no special group, which was really harsh, because I think people expect teachers to be some type of heroes. Unrealistic heroes.
We've been heroes for years. Yeah. That doesn't mean we have to die as a hero.
Yeah, exactly.
He means there's no special group. That's a lie. You tell me so if that's the case, then Governor, you come teach a class.
Yeah.
I guarantee you that he has measures in place that prevent a limited number of people in his area of work, his mass. Like, he has procedures in place. Teachers, listen, there's a classroom where they're doing these model classrooms, and Crystal, it has to be one of the most depressing things I've ever seen. There's nothing on the walls. It's like 15 desks in a classroom that looks so institutionalized. And what I'm concerned about, my baby boy, Lyndon, is going to be 6 years old. And he just started school, going to the first grade. If Lyndon has a remotely bad day or hard experience and he starts to cry, the teacher cannot console him or hug him or embrace him. What are you going to tell this 6-year-old black boy who's already traumatized by the death of George Floyd because he's asking those questions, who now is still thinking school is the same space? He's crying and you can't console him. You tell him just to suck it up and keep your mask on? Yo, teachers are not the answers to economical problems.
Exactly.
Stop trying to make us that.
Right.
We missed those markers a long time ago. So who's your governor?
McMaster, Henry McMaster.
Governor Henry, you're an idiot. You come teach a classroom then.
Yeah.
And until you teach a classroom, miss me with all of that.
And also, with that being said, I feel like, there's these unrealistic expectations. But then again, we're not, but the teachers aren't getting the funding or the training that they need to be the best teachers they can be. In order to control their students, or in order to make a warm, inviting classroom, in order to, implement this cultural relevant pedagogy, it's just a lot.
It is. I mean, education is already a lot. And now you want to throw a pandemic on top of it?
Yeah.
Come on, man.
Yeah.
If you want teachers to go back in a situation like that, then we demand hazard pay. We demand extra health care pay. Because think about it. I now have to figure out to make sure, if I'm on a rotating schedule as a teacher, where are my children going to be?
Exactly.
Yeah, but they want us to sacrifice for their kids, but we also make sacrifice for our kids. This is not a good situation for anybody. And there is a better answer, but the answer is definitely not just go teach so everyone can get back to work. That's not the answer, because that raises larger problems.
And I feel like they kind of put, everyone needs to go back to work for the economy. And also, I feel like to kind of lessen that argument or not make it so prevalent, they're saying, kids need to be in the classroom for development, children are falling behind, that sort of thing. How do you feel about that?
I'm not going to cuss on your podcast because I think it's probably a good family podcast to listen to. But I think that's a crock of
Yeah, exactly.
Kids were falling behind before COVID.
Exactly.
So being in the class, you weren't concerned when they were in the classroom. See, when they say now kids are falling behind, they're trying to play on the humanity of folks. But you weren't saying that years ago when kids are falling behind and you kept providing AIG only for the certain kids. You kept segregating classrooms. You weren't caring about it then, but now once again, knocking on white America's doorsteps, now you have a sense of concern and care. And you're using the plight of the black man, as usual, to prove your point that you need to have something else. White America, miss me. We are no longer your slaves for you to mistreat and misuse so you can get your way. No. You have to find your own plight. And it kills me. Never cared once about the black and brown plight before, but now all of a sudden when it comes to education and their issue, what about the children falling behind? Where were you last 2 years ago?
Exactly.
When the kid couldn't read then, it was falling into the gap. You didn't care then, and so now you want to care because you want to make it about money, which reminds me of the other thing they had us doing called slavery, which is for their economical gain. Miss me with this slave run that y'all trying to redo again. And I think that at the end, you got me on one today. It was my day off.
I love it.
But that's the thing. Like, there is no such thing that we need to go into education because kids are falling behind. I think we need to figure out during this point how we can help kids advance and relook at, why we're shut down, what were we doing for kids to fall behind? Exactly. What were we doing in the very beginning in the first place? It's about kids socializing. When you're talking about 15 desks in a room and you have to sit almost 6 feet apart from each other with a mask on and you can't communicate, tell me where the socialization happens.
Yeah, exactly.
Was it by eye? I mean, was it because I look at you and you look at me and we play tic-tac? I mean, tell me the socialization here.
Yeah.
All of these things that we're saying are important will not happen in schools. You can think about it. For a kid to even get on the school bus, they have to have their temperature checked. You can only have a certain number of kids on the bus. They cannot sit near each other. Then when you come into the building, you have to sit in certain marked chairs away from each other. Where is the socialization? Have you ever tried to talk to someone 6 feet away with the mask on?
Yeah, that's difficult in itself. They're like, what?
Yeah, I mean, it's the worst conversation.
Yeah.
And so I think they're saying this socialization piece because they're trying to play on humanity, when once again in these spaces we are lying about the truth. Mm-hmm. We are lying about the truth. Come out and just say it's about making sure that we can build the economy. Mm-hmm. So therefore, what we're going to do is open up schools. And those of you that need to go, go. But for our white affluent families that don't have to go, you can stay home and get remote learning and nothing affects you. But for our black and brown bodies where COVID has been shown to have a larger impact, we're going to put you in this cesspool of education malpractice that we already have going on and throw a pandemic on top of it and say, go to school and learn something.
Right, and use COVID as an excuse for why they aren't learning. When really, I think it goes back to like the curriculum. They're not having an all-inclusive curriculum. Like they're not using. I don't want to say they're not using all their resources, but I feel like they aren't.
They're not. They are teaching what's in front of them. We see so often that teachers teach what they were taught.
Yeah.
And we don't look past finding creative things. And when we do and it doesn't work, then we fall back to what is comfortable. And the essence of this work in equity work and racial work, one of the things that we always say is expect to experience discomfort. Teachers and administrators and educators need to have more discomfort. Because within discomfort, we find change. Mm-hmm. If we keep going back to comfort, why would you change?
Exactly.
Right? When I'm sitting in a place that makes me feel great and I can see some success, why would I change? I don't. But if I make everything's this uncomfortable, there's this level of discomfort that forces change, then we start to see some things moving, and that's what needs to happen when we think about how we educate our students of color. Right now is the time. I feel like we have education on the ropes, and you can call me Muhammad Ali. I float like that butterfly, stinging like a bee, because what I'm trying to knock out as are many barriers as possible before this system can regain and get back on its feet. And if I can knock out the barriers now while it's stumbling and replace those things with actual practices that benefit our students of color, that will then benefit everyone, it's amazing. I think, I can't remember the number per se, but a buddy of mine, James Ford, amazingly dope brother, we were in conversation, and he was talking about that if people understood that this gap is actually like a $4.3 billion or $1 trillion investment, it would change quickly. If white America understood that if we close this gap, it could benefit our whole country and we could be a wealthier nation, oh yeah, they'd be all for it then, because it's about finances. The problem they have to swallow is it just doesn't mean that I'm taking away from your kid. That means your kid doesn't get this upper advantage. It will benefit the whole. And that's where there's the problem, because the whole doesn't always benefit my house.
Exactly. And also, that makes me think of something else. So it makes me think of the labeling theory. So even though you tell them this, when there's a black kid in the classroom with his head down, oh, they're going to just write him off. And that really won't help the achievement gap as well. So I think is the internal biases that we have against brown people, black people, non-people of color as well, that we need to dismantle in order for the achievement gap to really be closed, even if they see the economic advantage.
And we have to think about a dual modality of instruction, right? Which meaning that we cannot engage our students in one way. I had a chance to meet this kid, it was the craziest situation. I'm walking downtown Greensboro with the wifey, and we just kind of kicking it, got the kids, and we're enjoying these murals, and this kid rolls up on me with his bike. And attached to his bike, he has this large cooler with bottles of water strapped. And my man is hustling. Right. And he rides up, and he's like, yo, you want to buy a bottle of water? And first thing I hit him with is, yo, I don't have any cash. Yo, he slicks back with me is, I take cash out. So the essence that I'm trying to engage him in this one sense of currency, and he's telling me, nah, I got whatever you need. I can take it any way you give it to me. Yeah. You don't have it this way, I can get it this way. That's that dual modality of reception that we have to start doing for our students. We have to start thinking about the multiple ways that we can give it to them, because if they don't want to take it via cash, the way we just stand and deliver, then how can I cash out this instruction to them and let this be a way that they gravitate to take it? And it's a dual modality that we don't think about. And, mind you, my man was selling a bottle of water for $2, but he found a need and a grind. And I wonder how, there's so much to that story I could tell you one day about this kid. Is amazing. How much do we take this essence of what he's doing and promote to really have a true, strong instruction? And I look at him, and everything that I see he represents is that this need of a dualship in his classroom. His brand needs to be seen, and you need to give it to him, and not necessarily just differentiate instruction, right? Because we're going to say, let's differentiate. That's a simple language. What I'm asking you to do is allow me to tell you what I want. That's not differentiation. That's me leading. I'm going to tell you, teach what I want to learn, how I want to learn it, and you're going to figure out how to give it to me.
Right.
That is the essence of instruction. That hits the dual modality.
Interesting. So how do you think, it kind of goes back to you saying, let's just blow up the system, because, there's some policies for teachers in place that can kind of hold teachers back from, trying to hold on it, go all in with the instruction, trying to quote unquote differentiate, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think we need to look at the policies we have in place and put a racial lens to it. And when you do that and have a true conversation, that's really going to make a lot of people uncomfortable. Most of the policies written in place have not been really changed since the ideas of segregation and integration in schools. When we integrated schools, it was not we integrated spaces, we didn't integrate ideologies. Right? We took our black and brown students and marched them into white spaces and then said exist. We did not take those white spaces and say we are bringing in cultural different spaces of black and brown bodies and we're going to make a new space. True integration would have been if you didn't go to the white school anymore, if you didn't go to the black school anymore, there was a whole new building set. That's true integration. But it wasn't really about integration, if we're being completely honest. It was not about integration. It was about infiltration. White America wanted to infiltrate the power structure that we had, because even though our books were backdated, even though we did not have the beautiful building that they felt like we knew we needed and the white kids had, we were still outperforming their behinds. And that white America could not understand. And so they infiltrated us under the auspices of integration. And we messed up. We gave away our secret.
Right.
And they used it against us.
Right.
And now we're paying for it.
Yeah. Because education was built for the white man. We weren't even inside our mind when they built it.
Frederick Douglass was unfit to be a slave the day he learned to read.
Yeah.
And what I think about is education. I think it was George Washington Carver said, this is George Washington Carver. Or was it W. Du Bois? They're cross-running my brains right now. Either way, one of them stated that education was a tool of the revolution. We used education as a black community to revolutionize and to come together. That was our sense. We got to get education was to bring us in this aspect of where we fought the power, we fought against the man. When the man started to realize that was the piece, he had to infiltrate that. Look at the infiltration of the Black Panther Party. Same thing. Medgar Evers, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King died all before they're 40, right? Because of the infiltrational aspects of bringing that community piece together and educating. That's where the crux of all of it lies for me. Healthcare disparities in education, wealth disparities in education, redlining and property disparities in education. All of it sits at the crux of the beginning of education. There is Chauvin, whatever that white dude's name is that killed George Floyd. He is sitting in our classrooms right now, and if we don't educate him in a better place, then we will perpetuate his racial ideas. Then he will then grow up to believe that his white supremacy is what has existed and the only thing that's important. It starts in education.
Exactly, and I completely agree with you, 100%. And so moving on to our last question. So,
most definitely.
How do you think the school funding will impact the way students and staff are protected from COVID-19 and the spread of it?
Yeah. So it's going to, I don't think the funding will prevent much of the spread. I do think we need funding. First of all, education needs to be funded more anyway. We can divest and defund the police a little more like we need to be doing and put that in education. And we can provide a lot of other things. I think what needs to happen as far as our funding is we need to make sure that we are providing students with everything needed to get through this remote space and this COVID space. So if that means I need to have almost 4 or 5 hotspots in my house to ensure that I'm getting online, then that's what I need. If we need to make sure that families have a place for childcare as teachers, then we need to make sure we're getting community members, our community faith-based organizations, the YMCAs, and we create that space that teachers then don't have to pay for. I think we need to use the funding to ensure that teachers have the technology needed to guide that aspect, and there's some training around that. I think the funding must be all diverged into how do we combat the educational malpractice that's happening during COVID. I don't think it needs to go back into these structural building spaces, because when it goes into a building, it's just into the building. It's not into the student. It has to be vested into the particular student and what they're saying that need is. Like, I'm looking people in the screen, you got a little dope microphone there and a little covering for your joints, right? Like,
yeah.
And I can hear you clearly, you can hear me clearly. You have those tools and resources. Why can't we deliver all of those to every kid along with their connection access to Wi-Fi? And why can't Spectrum and Time Warner and all these AT&T continue to provide free Wi-Fi like you jumped into automatically? Like, so I think our money has to go there into combating that, and then it stays there. So even when COVID is over, it stays within the student. So now I'm moving it into what you may need more as in college application and scholarship, what you may need more and far as for the FAFSA. Like, it needs to stay within the student, whatever that student needs, not necessarily just the structure itself. When it sits in the structure, then those who are resource hungry and resource hoarders go and hoard up all the resources before sometimes our more marginalized families even realize those resources are there. But if we can drive it straight to the student, straight, then we are eliminating those resource hoarders, because it's coming straight to the kid that needs it. Exactly. So for me, that's what needs to happen.
I completely agree, and I think the craziest thing about all of this is that it's really revealing the system's true colors. Oh, you have the resources and the money to do it, but you just weren't doing it before? Like, it's just mind-boggling.
All those beautiful Chromebooks you had locked up in the closet that you were holding sacred, now they can come out and come to everybody. Right. Why weren't they with everybody from the first place?
Yeah.
Oh, because we were keeping them safe. From what? What? Somebody typing on them? Somebody cutting them on and getting information? Come on. And you're right. It just highlighted the issues that we've been looking at, that we have been saying. But now, once again, come on, do it with me. Knock on the table. Knocking on white America door, and they had to answer that, and they don't like it.
Yeah, that is so true. I saw this thing on Instagram today that said that I mean, I don't know how reliable it is, but it's on the page Educators for Justice, and it says that $23 billion is how much more funding predominantly white school districts receive compared to districts that serve mostly students of color.
Yeah, I don't know the numbers on that, but I can definitely probably concur that I do know white districts receive more money than a lot of our districts of students of color. And what they're going to say is that you get Title I funding, but Title I funding gets generated generally towards not necessarily about color, but it's around the economical disadvantage. So those who receive free and reduced lunch, right? Then but that's not around students of color. I would agree. I don't know if it's $23 billion, but I also can tell you that there's a research done that the white high schools have more white students offer more AP courses than those who have black and brown students. And so when you start to look at potentially even some of the things that are offered within the courses and what students are offered, if we can take away the economics, which we know that sits there, also looking at what they're offered to and what the resources are given, it looks drastically different.
Right, exactly. And that comes from the taxpayers, am I right? Like, around the community, how much funding a school gets?
So there's several kind of pots. I mean, there's the state and local funding, and there's also some federal funding. But you heard the president saying, your president, not mine, that if we don't go back to school, he may think about cutting funding. Well, y'all cut funding a long time ago.
Yeah.
Let's be real. Yeah.
Well, I have a question that's like kind of like off topic, but it's like a question that's I've been pondering. I know in one of my education classes from last year, she was like, do you think poverty is the not poverty, but do you think education is the answer for people to get out of poverty? And I just want to know your opinion.
No.
Yeah.
we once thought that education was the key, but you still can see that you have a black man and a white man, same educational degree. The white man will still be making more than the black man. White woman, white black woman, same educational degree. The white woman will still be paid more. You look at those who do not have, a single white mom will still make more money than a single black mom. And so you can educate all day long, but the idea that I even get a call back when you realize my name. So let's take my wife. Her name is Jamisa Williams.
Yeah.
You not missing she a sister off her name. There's no questions. The likelihood that she often gets a call back reference to someone who has a more white sounding name. There's a difference there. So I don't even get the opportunity sometimes to interview and be a friend. And my resume can look as crystal clear as the white candidate, but I'm not giving that opportunity. There was even a research study done showing that if a black man with no criminal record and a white man with a criminal record, who would get opportunity for the job, it was still the white man with a criminal record, because they felt this sense of needing a second chance. What? I have lived my life free from criminal police brutality, right? Because I don't want to be dealing with the police in the first place.
Yeah.
Free of crime, and yet the white man who has some criminal activity on his record is still seen to be given a second chance when you didn't even give me the first chance. So we can be educated all day long. We're still fighting a system of race.
Exactly.
And it doesn't change the notions.
Yeah, exactly.
That's my answer. No.
Yeah, because I think I kind of was backwards in my thinking, I must admit, especially in education, going through education. I was just thinking, well, I kind of had like the white savior complex in me. I was like, I'm going to save so many kids, especially with the school to prison pipeline affecting our black boys. I was like, I'm going to go into education. I'm going to help those boys and girls that look like me. I'm going to push them and give them that chance so that they can be great. They can graduate. They can go to college. And they can get good jobs. But then it's like, it really doesn't guarantee anything, because you can get a good job, but you're still, seen as less than.
And here's the thing. I mean, that's what we're taught, though. Yeah. You were taught. I was taught. Our family was taught. Go to school, get education. Don't get me wrong. I think education puts us in different circles, but it is not the great equalizer that was once believed to be. It does not equalize race. Education doesn't then say now you all are equal playing field. No, it still has promoted, because whiteness started 400 years before we ever got the party running. In 1619, when slaves when Africans who were fathers, doctors, and lawyers and leaders of their country were brought here and then stripped of that right and became slaves, white America then started to create generational wealth. We're still creating generational wealth. And we are still just behind. We're trying to now get in that place. But I guarantee you this. Go ahead and eliminate all of their white privilege. Put us in a place where it's all equal and talent reigns supreme and true grit reigns supreme. We will own this nation. And they know that. And I'm afraid of that. Yes. So I'm saying lead the revolution. We call me the next Malcolm out here. It's revolution time. Right.
And I definitely agree, because honestly, it's just a system that's built on racism. That's what it all boils down to. Everything that this country was built on was racism, and it was not meant for black or brown people. No. So
race is a social construct.
Yes.
And when we believe and understand that race is a social construct built on the idea of creating a hierarchy for one group, then you understand that race is just what it is, racism. Ta-Nehisi Coates writes that racism is the father of race. You wanted to be superior, you had to find a reason to be better than me or to feel you were better than me, so therefore the one thing that stood out to you that you could identify quickly was race. And we even look at the issues of John Wolfe, when he then engaged with Pocahontas, then there was this notion of, well, now it's just not white, but if you have some white sense of descendants and you appear to be white, right? They change the game when they want to change it, when it fits them.
Right.
Yeah, I'm telling you, the racial game is real. It's out here in these streets, about as real as COVID.
And it's just crazy because it's just not America. It's global.
So I don't know. I disagree with that.
You do?
I think racism is an American thing.
You do?
When you think about different cultures, different countries will have issues of colorism.
Yes.
They will have different issues of biasness. But racial constructs and race really has generated itself around an American ideology. That's why when we fight against racism, people think we're hating America. Think about it. When we say Black Lives Matter, they feel like, well, you're not American.
Yeah, exactly.
Racism is just as natural as apple pie to these folks. And yet they get all caught off guard when we're fighting against it. I'm not fighting against white people. I'm fighting against racism. Now, if you are white and racist, then that's who I'm. Hey, you're just meeting the match here. But racism has become just a preternatural construct that when we discuss anything that goes against race and racism, they feel America is attached. We are removing the fabrics of the country. Racism is in their fabrics. So I really believe that racism strongly is held in American ideology. In America, there are things in different countries that have colorisms and ideas of gender hierarchical things. But I really believe that race, in my mind, from what I read, race is a American construct.
Interesting. I never really thought of that perspective, because when I say that, I was mainly thinking like of London and the UK, another like diverse place that kind of reminds me of America in a sense. I'm probably wrong, but because I know I saw this video of this white little boy. The mom showed this video to him of like this black guy, and the white baby was like, bad, he's stealing. So it's just like kind of the same thing that's integrated in some of the people's minds that are here in America.
Yeah, and don't think that racism can't float across the waters. I think it still began as a American construct.
Okay, that's very, very interesting. So, as an ending thought, so how do you think that? What is a way that we can blow up the system? Revolutionize.
I think it starts with a community. It has to be a community approach, right? And so when we think about who or what's in the system, we need people like you, young folks who are energized and vigorous and ready for the fight, to start getting in places where you are not welcome. Like, why don't you run for the school board?
Haven't thought of
Run for school board, sit in the seat. Yeah, you haven't thought of it, right?
Yeah.
Sit on the seat. Or why don't we make sure that we have representation from the school board as from our communities, so then our voices are being heard? Why don't we ensure that at parent-teacher conferences, or that parent-teacher conferences are held at times, and we're holding the districts accountable to meet the markers and what we deem for our students? I think we continue to push the Karens in the system out. We continue to call out these biases and privileges that these white folks are walking in. We do not give them the space and place to be comfortable anymore. And that's the parts of it. I think forcing the districts to change their ideas of what we teach and how we teach it, and the curriculum needs to be taught. That's the other piece. Making sure that the district has a very keen focus on how do we recruit and retain teachers of color. We both went to Clemson. Clemson has a history of racism. And so any of the Anderson, Pendleton, Seneca school districts that are around there are still penetrating and peddled with this sense of racism. How do we help remove that out? I mean, how many black administrators do you see in the school system? And if we don't see very many, we need to start asking why, because we do exist. Black administrators exist. They're not unicorns. And so what is the system saying? What is our district doing to repel them? And how do we fix it? But yeah, I think the first thing is I say Crystal for the school board for 2021 or whenever the new elections is. I'll vote for you. I'll come down and help run campaign.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to come talk to me and talk to us and help us cultivate and grow. So I hope you have a good night, and I'll talk to you soon.
You as well. Much love to you, baby cousin. Positive vibes and peace and blessings and journeys as you move forward in this work. So proud of you.
Thank you. Bye.